Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bazaar Overexplained. We are taking a look today at the brand new Season 3 changes that are going to be hitting the Bazaar right now. If you update the game, they're there. So let's go and check out all the exciting things that are now in the game. So to do this, we'll go over the general changes that are in the latest patch notes, then we'll talk about the new in-game event that you can get access to on day 9 if you meet the requirements. We'll talk about the new items that are available for each hero, and then we'll go ahead and talk about all the numbers changes that have affected our heroes in the Bazaar, including different items and different skills, and most notably many relic tags, as we'll see, but let's dive into it. So I've pulled up the official patch notes here, and there's a lot of really interesting changes that have come into the Bazaar here. Most notably, I would say there is now, if we look down here at the start of run, characters now start with 2 XP instead of 0 XP, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start from the top. So legendary rating, now when we're getting and hitting our legendary rating, we're going to start at 500, and then it's basically going to check our win count, and then it's going to improve our rating or degrade our rating, and you have to have, I believe it is, as they say over here, it is essentially kind of like the inverse of what we had before, if I'm reading this correctly, where before you'd be competing to be in the number 1 slot, but now it's more so calculating the overall wins that you have and then scaling, which the scale factor, I guess, is not necessarily something that we know what that means. I'm not really sure on that regard there. But we also have a 10-win bonus that factors into this equation, where, and I'm not a mathematician here, but basically it's if you're winning more, you're going to have a higher rating overall. If you're going to be legend, where this sentence here is pretty important, this math creates a situation where a player with an average of 8 wins will approach an 800 rating over time, while someone with 4 wins average will approach 400 over time. So I think we're competing to have a higher number, but we'll see how that all transpires, I suppose. Again, maybe I'm missing something here, but I believe that this is basically saying that we're increasing our number instead of dwindling our number, trying to get to that first slot. The next change here is that heal cleanses for 10% of the heal amount. So it used to basically say that for every instance of heal, this meant that we were going to be purging 10% of the status that was on us, whether it was poison or burning, but now it's going to cleanse based off the heal amount. I think that this is a more intuitive change, and it means that if you have 1,000 poison on you, or let's say 10 poison on you, and you heal for 1,000, you would be getting rid of all that poison, or I guess a better number would say if we heal for 100 and then we have 10 poison on us, it should heal and cleanse 10%, thus 10 of that poison gets off of us. So I think that that makes a lot more sense, and potentially a buff and more incentive for us to stack our heal items with bigger numbers instead of going for more heal triggers. So I think that like something like a money tree would be more valuable in this sense. But yeah, pretty interesting effect there. Combat only effects, this is not too relevant for us. A big change here is the cooldown reduction. So essentially the thing that we need to know about this is that shuffling cooldown items before applying on-cell percentage-based cooldown reduction effects, so basically a feather or an insect wing, no longer has an effect. So all reductions are now pooled. So essentially it's going to check the base cooldown, and it's going to check the flat cooldown reduction, and then it's also going to have the separate cooldown reduction clause that I believe is based off a separate factor here. So we can't kind of manipulate it so that we keep we have like an item in our backpack that'll increase the cooldown of our different items. Let's say something like a fort, which increases the cooldown of our items by 1 second. And then we put on we put that on the board, we pop a feather that would reduce everything by 4%. Now this is not going to affect the item more greatly, so there's no real need to kind of like try and min-max on your cooldown reduction like that. So just keep that in mind. And then moving forward here, so at the start of runs, characters now start with 2 XP instead of 0 XP. So this means that you are going to level up and get to level 2 on your first day. This is pretty nice here, so you're going to be filling out your board more quickly. In some ways, this probably makes income starts a little more valuable in the Bazaar, just because you can more reliably fill your board and things like that. But overall, I really like this change, because we were kind of in this weird spot before where if you didn't have any way to gain an extra XP compared to your opponents. You're always like 1 XP node behind your ability to level up on that day. So I think that this is a pretty nice change here. Additionally here, level up changes. Now when we level up, tiers that offer enchants are now just the artist. And if you're unfamiliar with which one the artist is, that is this one. So basically the artist, it's our enchant one item with a random enchantment vendor. So now we don't have a choice between a guaranteed enchant that we see in front of us versus a random enchantment. We basically can only choose a random enchantment when we hit like our level 10. So that is a really huge change here. So now it's much harder for us to guarantee we get the synergy we want with our builds. We will be reaching level 10 a little bit earlier on just because we gained that 2 XP at the start of the game compared to having 0. But now if we're trying to like value stack a certain item and then put an enchant on it, we're trying to put some damage on it, it's going to be much harder to do so. But this is now contrasted with Futura and the Fates, which is our death enchant. Now when we go there and we click that opportunity to go and find an enchant or put an enchant on our item, now looks to be that we have 2 specific enchant pedestals. So we've removed the random one from that, and it looks to be that we have actually 2 enchant pedestals that should tell you which enchant you're going to get for your item. So that's pretty interesting. Other things here that I want to go over, a lot of this is kind of like general changes here. They have changed some of the encounters here. So this is a really nice one. I know that one people have called for is that in the Strange Mushroom event, now you have an option for Dooley where you can share it with a friend and gain a small silver to your friend. So that's pretty nice to have on Dooley here. The Jungle Ruins also now can give Vanessa not only a weapon, but they are going to give her an apparel of a silver tier variety of any hero. So that could be a pretty interesting one where we can get a item from all the different heroes in the game and kind of start on a powerful build that is very fresh, just because you wouldn't have had the opportunity to get an item from a hero very easily or otherwise. So I think that's pretty cool. The next one here is the Temple Expedition, which is the new encounter that spawns on day 9 as we see here in the Bazaar. And why don't we talk a little bit more about what that looks like specifically. So I pulled up this Mobalytics article that talks about the Greenheart Expedition, and I highly encourage that you read it if you'd like to learn a little bit more in depth on what it is going to be, but I will also link the video that kind of spoils it and introduces it from the nice animations from the Bazaar and Tempo team themselves. But I am going to go over this article and kind of give you a little bit of an overview. Again, thank you for the creators of this article for putting this together. It's very informative. But essentially, it is going to be an event that takes over all of day 9 if we have the ability to go there. And what allows us to get this is if we get this Temple Expedition ticket. So it says on day 9, it allows you to embark on the Temple Expedition. So this is a brand new event again here. And with that, we can also go back to our patch notes real quick and see that these are the places that we can get the Jungle Expedition ticket. So the Warrior, Dabbling Apprentice, Street Gamer, and all these other ones, we're going to give you the option to get an expedition ticket. It's not guaranteed that they drop from any of these given monsters. However, we can see that a lot of these are like the highest tier monster that you can fight for each day, being like Hellbilly, Prince Marianus, Eccentric Aetheryte, Gorgon Noble, Trashtown Mayor, things like that. So generally you have a little bit more incentive to, one, check to see what monster that you have in front of you and if they have a ticket referencing this list. And also you're going to want to go there just to see if you can get into this day 9 event, because it can be very powerful for your run. But yeah, let's go back and look at this. So you have, again, if you get that ticket from any one of these, it also looks to sell for 8 gold. So if you don't want to go, I imagine you could just sell this off and you won't encounter this event. So again, as we can see here at the start of your day 9, you are going to have this expedition be a 4th option for you, it looks like, in the Bazaar. If you do have the ticket, so it won't take up one of the 3 slots, but it'll be an additional 4th slot that we'll have access to on day 9. And with that, you will then go into a complete separate encounter that will then take over your day 9 cycle. You won't get like an additional day 9 cycle. It'll have a corresponding hour that goes with each of the events. And let's get into what those hours look like. So first and foremost here, you're going to have your hour 1, which will allow you to kind of pick what theme or enchantment your run is going to be based off of. So it looks like we have the fiery, toxic, and obsidian as the different ones that we can choose from. You'll then go to hour 2 and basically fight a trap, which is, as we can see here, kind of like just like a really ridiculous board, really obscene encounter that has one of the effects that you picked from this piece here. So you're going to want to know what this encounter looks like, and I don't have the information on what all of them look like, but I believe the Caltrops has a bunch of Caltrops, the blowgun has a bunch of blowguns, and the boulder has a boulder. So notably, if you go obsidian and you choose boulder, that's going to be pretty tough for you. Just saying. Just saying. Moving forward here, so you're going to fight that fight. If you win that fight, you're then going to have the opportunity to get a piece of loot that corresponds to the enchantment that you chose. So if you're in a fire build, you're probably going to want to pick the fiery enchant so you can get something like a cinders, but what that loot looks like, I'm not so sure of right now. We'll look and see what that is a little bit later on. But yeah, we can kind of get a sneak peek here of what the boulder looks like and then what the blowgun looks like there. And again, the Caltrops has a bunch of Caltrops. So again, you get your reward here on hour 3, and then hour 4, you have the opportunity to fight a PvE monster of different rarities. I think that there are only these 3. They have different loot items that they can give you. Notably, they have some really powerful and legendary items that you can get, and some that are just unique to these encounters, including some skills that are unique to these encounters. So when you do that, you can defeat that monster, and then you will go into your loot phase here where you can get a couple different legendary relics. And say if you successfully defeat the final encounter, you'll be presented with 3 random legendary relics. Some of these items offer very unique abilities and potentially open up new builds for your run. So yeah, I believe I'm not sure if you get only legendary relics that are corresponding to this item pool here, or if you get legendary relics outside of it. I believe it's only these ones, but we shall see. Looking at these legendary relics here, there are pretty powerful ones. And actually, I think that we can go into howbazaar.gg and see more here. But let's look at these first and foremost. So we have the Flame Coil Gem. It's a 6-second small relic item that burns for 5 for each burn item you have, so it's pretty powerful. It also sells for 50, which is pretty nice, and it has 2 very interesting clauses. The first being, this item's cooldown is reduced by 1 second for each other relic you have, so this, if you have a bunch of relics on your board, can be an insane burn dealing item. And it also says, when you sell this, enchant your leftmost item with fiery, so it's a guaranteed fiery enchant on your item if you want to go that route. So that's pretty potent, pretty powerful. The next one here is the Ice Watch Warden, which is a medium relic with an 8-second cooldown. It's also a quest item. It's going to freeze one item for 1 second, and then it has a locked ability here that says charge adjacent relics for 1 second. And then 2 static clauses here, or 1 static clause that says when you freeze, poison, burn, charge this 1 second. So this thing can go off like crazy if you have the different elemental effects here and freezing a bunch of items. And then you can unlock that charge adjacent relics by freezing, poisoning, or burning 100 times. Notably, you are going to get this pretty late in the game, so it's not trivial to do that, but it is certainly a very powerful part of this new item. Another one here is the Null Frost Altar, which we can make it a little bit bigger here for you guys to see. And let me just move myself out of the way. There we go. So the Null Frost Altar, this is a large relic item. It is a static item. It says when a player uses an item, freeze it for 1 second. When any item gains freeze, remove all freeze from it. So essentially on our board, we're creating, when any item gains freeze, rather. Okay, so never mind. It's going to remove freeze from every item that is on the board. So if any player freezes, it basically is just going to create a trigger of freeze. And then this might actually just counter all the freeze builds in the game, which is kind of crazy to think about, unless you have a freeze item like a giant ice club that really cares about those charges. But then you have when you freeze, your weapons gain 10 damage and your shield items gain 10 shield for the fight. So this is going to create a bunch of freeze triggers, and it's not actually going to freeze any items, but it's going to buff your damage and your shielding items, which is pretty cool. And the last one that I have up here is the Spirit Diffuser. This is a large relic item that says at the start of each fight, enchant one non-enchanted item on each player's board for the fight. So that's pretty interesting. And then it says when an enemy uses an enchanted item, charge one enchanted item for 2 seconds. So you're giving your opponent an enchanted item, and probably at this phase in the game when you get this item, your opponent is going to have a guaranteed enchant because they hit level 10. So they are going to have probably a minimum of 2 items if you have the Spirit Diffuser on board that are going to charge your enchanted item. So pretty interesting effect there. It could be one that, you give your opponent something really crazy and that ruins your run, but risk reward here is pretty insane. And it sells for 50 gold too if you don't want that. So that's one thing there. And I've gone to howbazaar.gg here, and it's an interesting thing that they do. So they, from what I understand, can data mine the game. So they have access to the files, and that's where they pull a lot of their information from, or if not all their information from, and they can reference the changes. So you can go to like this icon up here in the top right, and then from there it'll show you all the different ways that the items have changed in the game. But we can also do something really cool here, which is if we want to see all the new legendary items, we can go to starting tiers, hit legendary, and then boom, here are all the new legendary items in the game. So I'll go through each of these. Barb Spiked Warden has a cooldown of 8 seconds, poisons for 10, says when you freeze, poison, or burn, your relics gain plus 10 poison, and when you use another relic, charge this 1 second. That's super cool. Very potent effect. Gaining 10 poison for the fight whenever you use a relic is pretty awesome. As we'll see, a lot of items have gotten the relic tag in the game, so it's not just something for Dooley or Mak, who, as we saw in my previous video, where they're getting a bunch of new relic items just naturally through their expansions. This is going to give them something where a lot of different heroes can utilize this relic tag, so that's pretty cool. The next one here is Blaze Howl Warden, which is very similar to the Barb Spike Warden, but it just does burn. So burns for 10, 8-second cooldown. Says when you do an elemental effect, you're going to gain plus 10 burn on your relics for the fight. It itself is a relic, and so is the Barb Spike Warden, so it's going to gain more of that elemental for each time that you do those other pieces here. And then it's going to charge your other relics for 1 second, so pretty cool. Darkstone Engine is the next one here. It is a medium item. It says cooldown of 5 seconds. It has lifesteal. It does 100 damage. It says at the start of each fight, enchant a non-enchanted item with obsidian for the fight. So that's really cool, very powerful. And then the last clause here, it says this has +1 multicast for each obsidian enchanted item that you have. So one that could be pretty insane for your runs. 5-second cooldown for 100 damage with lifesteal at level, or day 9 rather, is not the craziest thing. 200 at 5 seconds is certainly good, but it's not the most powerful. But again, giving something on your board obsidian can be pretty crazy here. And I guess you can't control what it's going to give obsidian, so it's harder to use in that way, but the risk reward on it is pretty insane. Anyway, moving forward here, the Dark Stone Focuser. So cooldown of 8 seconds. It's a small item. It's a lifesteal item as well. Deals 50 damage for each weapon that you have. It also says this item's cooldown is reduced by 1 second for each relic that you have. So another common theme here. And it says when you sell this, enchant your leftmost item with obsidian. So this is one that kind of like that fiery gemstone, I think it was, that we saw before. You can get this and enchant something with obsidian if we don't want to use this item specifically, although it can be very potent. The fact that it is a small lifesteal weapon that does a pretty decent amount of damage, and that can get charged, or at least have rather a lower cooldown if you have relics on your board, is pretty cool. So love that. The Dragon Heart already exists in the game, so does this. Here's the Flame Coil gem that we saw before. There's the Ice Watch Warden. Here is Mayatoan Altar. So this is like the gem, where it has an 8-second cooldown, poisons 5 for each poison item that you have. So pretty good on Mak, I would say, but also probably on Vanessa as well. even Dooley, but probably those other first two more so. It says this item's cooldown is reduced by 1 second for each relic that you have. So again, like the other gems here. And then it says when you sell this, enchant your leftmost item with toxic. So pretty strong there, and one that, you know, getting a guaranteed toxic enchant on your item is pretty cool. Moving forward here, we've seen the altar, and we've seen this. This is in the game. We've seen the spirit diffuser, and okay, that's it. So those are the new enchant, or rather the new legendary items that are going to be coming to the game. Pretty excited for those, and ones that we're going to be getting through this new event. So that's the new Greenheart Expedition explained here. And again, I'll put the article down below for you guys to read more in depth. And notably that it'll take up your day 9, and then you'll still have your PvP fight that you have at the end of day 9 normally. So pretty cool, pretty fun. One that you won't get in all of your runs just because you're not always going to get a ticket. But when you do, and then you can go through it, it can have some pretty powerful rewards for you. So very excited for that. But now let's go in game here where we can look at the new items. I have a separate video where I've kind of reviewed all of these different items here, but I do want to show you where you can get access to them. So there are 2 new expansions that are going to be hitting the Bazaar. The first is for Dooley here at level 15, and the second is 30 for Mak. So let's dive into Dooley here and look at some of these items. I'll put timestamps below. If you've seen my other video, I'm going to be covering a lot of the same things here, but if you'd like to skip forward, again, I'll have those timestamps for you to do so. So first up here is Tanky Anky. It is a 6-second cooldown item that is a large friend dinosaur weapon. It deals 50 damage. It also has 2 static clauses here, and they actually, I think, have nerfed it compared to what I originally saw here. It says enemy weapons have -10 damage, so that's very strong. And then it says when one of your dinosaurs deals damage, gain that much shield. So that's super powerful and potent effect that I think just both of those static clauses are really interesting. You can completely negate a damage-based build from your opponent, and you can give basically all of your items a shield enchant. I think that that's super strong, and one that will slot into many builds, even if you don't have a dinosaur synergy. And yes, this is a dinosaur synergy that we see on screen here. Dinosaurs and relics are things that we're going to care about a lot in this patch. The next item here is the Temporal Navigator. It is a medium tech vehicle. It has a 6-second cooldown. It hastes adjacent items for 1 second. It says if this is your only tech item, its cooldown is reduced by 50%. It also says at the start of each day, get a relic from any hero. So I really like this item. I think that this is one that has the opportunity to do some really cool stuff. It has the opportunity to both give us a relic at the start of each day, which is very important in this latest patch where, again, we've seen some really cool relic synergies. It also says that it can play on our board very well because it's hasting adjacent items, and it could be going off at every 3 seconds to do so. It reminds me again of something like a captain's wheel, which does something rather similar. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this item. I think the Temporal Navigator is going to be a good one, and it's rare that we see an economy item that we can play on our boards. The next item here is the Dino Saddle. This one says it is a medium property relic. It has a 6-second cooldown, shields for 30. It says your vehicles have +1 multicast. It also says if you have a dinosaur, this is a vehicle. So if you have another dinosaur, notably this will gain +1 multicast. Interesting that it starts at gold tier here, and it's if we have another dinosaur, going to shield for 60 at 6 seconds. I will say that multicast triggers are very important in the game, and it doesn't exactly read as shield 60 at 6 seconds. It has 2 separate instances of shielding, which can be very important with something like a Armadillo that cares about separate instances of shielding. So overall, I think that this item is very strong, and one that if we can play it with a vehicle will be super good. Notably, we can give items the vehicle tag with the item thrusters, so we can kind of do something similar to what we do on Vanessa with the piano and card table, where the piano, I believe, can give one of our items the friend tag, and then the card table can give +1 multicast to friends, but this will be 1 slot smaller as the thrusters is a small item, so we can do something similar, and I think that's really fun. The next item here is Flintstones, and yeah, it's Flintstones, y'all. I don't know. I remember the cartoon. That's just me, you know. Anyway, it's a small tool relic. It has a 4-second cooldown, and it says 2 separate things here. One is burn 3 for each relic or tool that you have, and it also says this item's cooldown is increased by 1 second for each tech item you have. So you don't want to be playing it with a lot of tech items, you want to play it with mostly relics and tools. And yeah, if we can get a lot of relics and tools, this can be a pretty serious burn enabler, or it can do a lot of burn damage. 4 seconds is pretty fast, and I'm curious here. Let's look at how Bazaar.gg. So we can see how it scales here. Flintstones looks to have a burn clause of 3, 4, 5, 6. Interesting. Okay, so it doesn't get any reduced cooldown, but it is going to be burning more. That's pretty nice. Good stuff to know. Next up here is the Trollosaur. So it's a bunch of tags here. It is a medium dragon dinosaur weapon friend with a 7-second cooldown. It's going to deal 10 damage. It's going to burn equal to 10% of this item's damage, so kind of like a mini flamethrower effect. It says the first time a player falls below half health, destroy a small item. And that's interesting. The first time a player, not the first time you fall below half health. So this is going to guaranteed trigger, and it might trigger even twice to be able to have that destroy a small item clause. So, oh wait, no, it says the first time a player falls below half health. Right, so just once, so you're going to always guarantee get a trigger from this, which is pretty cool. And it says when you destroy an item during a fight, this permanently gains plus 10 damage. So it's similar to like the Momosaur or Dianosaur. Notably the Momosaur, when you destroy an item, it's going to give all of your items damage, permanent damage, whereas the Trollosaur is only going to give itself damage. But overall, a really cool item, and I think that this tag here is going to be pretty important. And yeah, let's look at Bazaar.gg for a second. How Bazaar.gg. So here's the Trollosaur and how it scales. I was really curious about this. So it says when you destroy an item during a fight, this permanently gains 10, 20, and 30 damage. So we're not going to have an increase on this percentage damage. We're just going to have an increase on the permanent damage that it gives. So that's still a very powerful effect and something that can certainly scale the damage of it and our board pretty nicely. So yeah, cool item for sure. The next item here is going to be our Dino Disguise, a medium dinosaur relic apparel item that has an 8-second cooldown. It shields for 10, and then it says adjacent items are dinosaurs, and this has +1 multicast for each other relic or dinosaur you have. So it's going to guaranteed, if you play it at least not on the corners of your board, it's going to guaranteed have 2 other dinosaurs on board, which is pretty cool. So it's going to be like an 8-second cooldown, shield for 30. Not a really strong item, to be honest, but again, having multiple shield triggers is pretty cool and something that an item, again, like a Armadillo would want to see. With that, it also plays into both the relic or dinosaur build, which is pretty nice. And if we can get an enchantment on this, it could be pretty potent. So pretty cool thing that we can do there. The thing that I see most being viable with this is we put the dinosaur tag on like a damage item, a damage dealer, something like an Uzi or a pulse rifle or something like that, that does a lot of damage. And then we can start scaling it up with something like a Momosaur, which is going to give all your dinosaurs more damage permanently when you destroy an item. So I think that could be really cool. The next item here plays really well with their Dino Disguise. It is the Primal Core, so this will be taking one of the slots at your level 3. You will have the opportunity to get the Primal Core. It is a medium weapon dinosaur core relic. It says at a 7-second mark, deal 50 damage, and your dinosaur and relic weapons gain +10 damage for the fight. So it will be buffing itself up, which is pretty cool. It also has the charge abilities that most cores have, where it says when you use another dinosaur or relic, charge this 1 second. And it has a really important clause here where it says adjacent items are relics. So if we have our Primal Core and our Dino Disguise on board, we can pretty much turn the entirety of our board, I guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so most of our board, but not our entirety of our board, into relics or dinosaurs, which is pretty cool. So we can start pumping up some serious damage. And I compare this to an item, again, like Shark Claws or like a Showcase that is going to be dishing out and pumping up the damage on our board with our weapons. And this is a little behind the curve in terms of the numbers, but if this is, I'm interested to see. I think that this is the bronze tier stat line, even though that this is silver tier. Let's confirm that. Okay, so it looks to be, it is the silver tier stat line. So it's going to get 10, 20, 30 damage based off its tier. And we can compare that again to something like a silver tier Shark Claws, which is going to bump up our board for 20 damage, but we don't put that damage on the Shark Claws anymore. So it's a little behind what the other enablers do that are similar to it. However, I think that it's going to play pretty nicely into our dinosaur and relic builds. Next up here is Rex Specs, which is a really cool item. And oh, let me move myself out of the way. Okay, not that one, not that one. I swam to this side. All right, here we are. Anyway, so Rex Specs is a large dinosaur friend weapon. It says at the 15-second mark, we're going to deal 100 damage. It also says if your enemy has more items than you, destroy one of their items. So at that 15-second mark is when this thing is going to trigger. It also says when you use another dinosaur, charge this 2 seconds. It's a pretty potent effect. And it also says when you use another friend, this gains 50 damage for the fight. So this not only cares about dinosaurs, but it cares about friends. It's something that can slot into both of those builds, which is pretty interesting. So if you don't have a bunch of dinosaurs, maybe it'll be good in a friends build. Ultimately, I think that having another destroying item, or one item that destroys an item, is something that we're going to really want in our dinosaur builds, as it's going to synergize well with our other dinosaurs and dish out permanent damage onto our board, which is pretty cool, again, with something like a Momosaur. Yeah, I like the Rex Specs. I think it's going to be an interesting item. It starting at gold tier means we're not going to see it in a lot of our runs, but as we'll see, the Momosaur has been actually buffed in a way where you can get it at silver tier. So this is something that's pretty cool and something that we can potentially play on our boards together. The next item here is the crude tools. So this is a small tool relic. It has a 6-second cooldown. It says charge one tech item 1 second. It says also at the static clause here, if you have exactly one tech item, its cooldown is reduced by 1. So we can think about this in some ways like a battery that is going to be charging the item next to it. This is something that doesn't necessarily play into the theme of this set, which I think is good. I'm personally on the side of I like the items that are introduced in these expansions to play well with all the different items in the Bazaar and not just want to be played with themselves together. So I do like that the crude tools is working well with our tech items. Even though the only tech item that we have from here thus far is this tech vehicle, the temporal navigator. But regardless, I think that this crude tools, again, pretty good effect. We know how good the battery is, and I think that this is going to be something that we want to play in our runs if we have a tech build. Notably, if you have exactly one tech item, its cooldown is reduced by 1 second. Let's see how that levels and scales. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. It doesn't increase the charge time or the reduction in cooldown, but it is going to reduce its own cooldown. So if we get it to diamond tier, it'll have a 3-second cooldown. That's pretty interesting. Again, reminds me of a battery, but the battery charges more. So less good, but still potent in the right builds. And then the last item we have here is the Dinosaur, which is a small weapon friend relic dinosaur tool vehicle. Wow, look at all that. That's a lot of text. With that, it is going to deal 10 damage out of that 5-second mark, but it also has this really interesting text line that says this item's cooldown is reduced by 50% if you have at least 4 other dinosaur tools or relics. And again, with something like the Primal Core or something like the Dino Disguise, I think that this can be a really potent damage dealer, and really it's something that I think is going to enable a lot of these builds, having the relic type, having the dinosaur type, the tool type, the vehicle type, the friend type. All of this plays really well with these different items here. So I think that when we see the dinosaur, or the dinosaur, this is going to be an item that we want to pick up just to enable our dinosaur build. So pretty excited for this item, and I would say that it may look a little innocuous, but a 2.5-second cooldown damage dealer is pretty good. If we can start scaling damage on this permanently with some of our other dinosaurs, that could also be very potent and powerful for us. But yeah, these are the new items here for Dooley, and interestingly, we have the option to unlock them in the prize pass, or we have the opportunity to purchase them. And I believe if I hit this purchase button here, I can use my gems to purchase this for 3,000. And then voila, it is unlocked. And I can go over here. And, I have a run of Vanessa booted up right now, so I don't think I can look at it right now. But that's weird, visual glitch, but I now have the Dooley expansion unlocked and I can start playing with those new items. So next up, we have the Lost Treasures expansion for Mac. So this is going to introduce a new mechanic into the game, which is this questing mechanic that we'll see on these items. So let's dive in. So first one here is Life Conduit. It is a medium relic item that has a 5-second cooldown. It says gain 2 regen for the fight. It has this locked clause on it, which I can't hover over on it. Either way, that says when it's locked, when you regen, this gains 2 regen for the fight. So that's a pretty interesting clause there. To unlock that, our quest, if so to speak, is to buy 10 regen items. And then if we have 75 regen on this item, it's going to gain +1 multicast. So with this is kind of a cycle of items where we can see this same sort of templating on a couple different items here. It is, let's just look at those items real quick. So we have an Idol of Decay, which is basically the same templating, but for poison. Eternal Torch, which is the same templating, but for burn. And then we have two that are a little dissimilar, but similar in some ways. We have the Sands of Time, which is an 8-second cooldown medium relic. It slows one item for 1 second. It also has a locked clause on it that says when you use another relic, charge this 1 second. It also says buy 6 slow items to unlock that locked clause. And then, I didn't know they had fire trucks in the ocean. Anyway, and then it has buy 10 relics and this gains multicast. I believe that's permanent. And that these other ones will then be permanent, just seeing how this is templated here. So I believe if we have 75 poison on this item, it will also gain +1 multicast, just generally speaking. And it'll have unlocked if that templating is the same as Sands of Time. So this Sands of Time also has the same templating that is going to be on the Frost Totem, which is an 8-second cooldown medium relic. Again, that freezes one item for 1 second. It also has the locked clause that says when you use another relic, charge this 1 second. It says buy 4 freeze items to unlock that lock clause, and then we can buy 10 relics to give this multicast. So it's changed a little bit since when it was spoiled, which is interesting here, and I'm curious to see how it scales. Okay, so looked it up here. And it is going to have a cooldown of 8-7-6-5. It's not going to freeze any more items. It's not going to freeze them for any greater duration. It's just going to have a lower cooldown. So when I originally looked at this item, I thought that maybe that these numbers would change as we leveled it up, but that's not the case. It is just going to have a lower cooldown, but if it's getting charged, that's pretty potent and powerful nonetheless. And with this, so just for those who might be listening and not watching here, kind of I encourage you, if this is like a podcast for you, why not? So the Sands of Time, which is the slowing relic with the quest, and then the Frost Totem, which is the freezing relic for the quest, those have the same templating. And then the regen, poison, and fiery relics that have a quest on them have the same templating. So it's a little bit different between the two, which is kind of cool to have different quests that you're ultimately trying to accomplish. But let's keep moving forward to these other items here. So the next one is Tomb of the Ancients. So this is a large relic property with a 6-second cooldown. It says gain 5 regen for the fight. It also says this has +1 multicast for each other relic that you have. It also has interesting clauses here that say separately, complete 1 quest on another item, and then this is going to gain poison. Complete 2 quests on another item, and this is going to gain frost or freezing. So having, this clause of gaining 5 regen on a 6-second item, on a large item, not that good, but if we can give this thing multicast, that is really powerful and important. There are also some items that care about seeing individual triggers of regen, so that's pretty interesting here. And then if we can give this thing poison, or if we can give this thing freezing, I think that freezing clause there is going to be pretty huge, and I imagine, but I don't know for sure, that the Tomb of Ancients may not have to be on your board to see these other quest items trigger, and thus if we can complete quests on 2 other items and then find a Tomb of the Ancients, that's going to be super potent for us. So unsure about how that works. I believe it's tracked internally, but we'll find out. We'll certainly find out. Moving forward here to the Soul Stone, yet another quest item. It is a small relic with a 6-second cooldown. It says gain 3 regen for the fight, and it has 2 separate questing clauses. So the first one is buy 8 poison items or 8 burn items, and then it is going to get poison or burn, depending on which that you accomplished first. So the other one, then you're are going to enchant it, or not enchant it, but it is going to gain the poison property via the item itself internally, and then you could enchant it on top of that if you wanted to. However, it can't have poison and burn from that same quest clause. It's going to be poison or burn. And then it has a separate questing clause here that says buy 4 slow items or buy 4 freeze items, and then it will gain slow or freeze. So a pretty interesting item. Again, looking at when they were originally spoiled, it looks like the quests are much easier to accomplish. So I like to see that. Before, it was we would have to buy so many relics or put so many instances of poison or burn on these other items, but this, I think, makes it a lot more viable compared to what we saw before and what we see now. So yeah, I'm liking these questing items. My general critique on the questing items is, why would I buy an item that I have to work to upgrade when I could just buy something more powerful? But genuinely speaking, I think some of these are going to be rather powerful if we can find the right synergies with them, doing a ton of poison, a ton of burning, or whatever the soul stone we might give it. So excited for those. Then 3 more items here. This is then the blank slate. It says when you use another relic, charge this 1 second. It has a 6-second cooldown. So it initially does nothing, or I guess it says when you use another relic, charge this 1 second. So that's what it does, but it doesn't do anything when it goes off. We have to first complete a quest. So one of the quests here, and these are 5 separate lines. From my understanding, from what Kriparian in his video was saying, these are going to basically, you can only get one. It's going to lock off the other quests. So you can either poison 50 times, gain regen 40 times, burn 30 times, slow 20 times, or freeze 10 times. And then this will gain the corresponding property, whether you're poisoning, regenning, burning, slowing, or freezing. I think that this is a pretty interesting item. It starts at bronze. And then if, again, it's confirmed that it can only gain one of these, I imagine what we're going to be utilizing this most with is poisoning, just because Mak has so many different poison items in the game. Regen is also pretty strong, and I realize that I'm covering up a little bit of these item descriptions here. There we go. So I'm unsure what the numbers are going to look like on this item exactly. I don't think that I can see that on howbazaar.gg, but having an item that we can gain a lot of poisoning on or gaining a lot of regen on, that is also going to charge our other relics, is pretty strong. If we can even get this thing to freeze, that's pretty cool. I like that we can get this at different phases of the game and that it's going to do different things for us. So yeah, ultimately pretty happy and excited to utilize this item. Unsure how powerful it's going to be, but one that, we shall see. The next item here is the macro scope. So it's a small tool with a 7-second cooldown. It says slow one item for 1 second. It also says if you have another relic, quest, or enchanted item, this has +1 multicast for each. So creating a lot of slow triggers is very good in the Bazaar, just with items like a Magnus Femur, which I think is where this item is going to most naturally slot in. Most notably, Magnus Femur is a relic, so it will see that and not initially have a +1 multicast if we just have the Femur and the macro scope on board. So yeah, this could be a pretty cool item. It's one that reminds me a lot of Incense, but it's a little slower than Incense. However, it can have a lot more slow triggers for us, so I think that this could be pretty potent. The next item here is Excavation Tools. It is a small tool with a 6-second cooldown. We can charge an adjacent relic for 1 second, and if you have a quest item, reduce this item's cooldown by 50%. So again, another charging effect similar to the one we looked at before with Dooley, Crude Tools, I believe it was, and then also something similar to a battery. I imagine that this is just like the Dooley item, going to have a reduced cooldown for every time that we level it up. Something that certainly can be powerful, and specifically on Mak, we generally want to find items that are reducing our cooldowns, because in the later portions of the game, Mak builds can be very slow, but this can help us get our builds off the ground. So very potent item, and yeah, one that I'm excited to play with in the Bazaar. And you know what? Let's just hit that purchase button right there. So you're going to be seeing that in the runs here to come. Okay, so we have looked at a lot of the new items in the game. Let's talk about numbers changes for our items. Spoilers here, there are not a ton. There are not a ton of numbers changes, which is kind of disappointing because I really would have liked to see things get shaken up more, but that's not to say things are bad. I think that we're going to get, as we see here, relic type on a lot of different items, which is very good. But let's start with Dooley here. So first thing first, the armored core, the critical core, the ignition core, and the weaponized core now all have this different cooldown templating where they start at silver and then they're going to have 7, 6, 5 second cooldown depending on the rarity. Before they all started at 6, so now at diamond tier they are better, but at silver tier they are worse, so just keep that in mind. Next up here, just moving down the list here. So Alpha Ray starting at silver. Okay, that's fair. Bulldozer, your other friends have their cooldowns reduced by a smaller amount of cooldown reduction. And then this is going to be a theme that we see across the entire numbers changes, where ultimately that a lot of the cooldown reduction stuff has just been reduced. So things are going to be a little bit slower in the game overall. Next year, Chris Army Knife now has the tech tag, which is pretty interesting. So I believe has the tool tag, the friend tag, and the tech tag. So pretty cool. Also, it's going to be going off a little bit faster. Again, the critical core has that change on its cooldown here. The cog has gained the relic type, which again is pretty relevant with Dooley now wanting to have more relics. Copper Ed has been buffed with its cooldowns. Cybersecurity here now counts both weapons and tech items instead of just weapons, and then it has this deals 2, 3, 4 times damage if it is your only friend, which we can actually see how that's changed. So I really love this feature of howbazaar.gg where again we can click this little clipboard up here and then we can type in thing that we are looking for and cybersecurity. So let's see, before it dealt 30, 40, 50 damage for each weapon or tech item you have. Now it's just a static piece here, and then this is not set. Interesting. Okay, I'm not really sure how this has changed too much here, but regardless, it can now count the tech items. And going back to the patch notes, so for the flamethrower, it has been ultimately nerfed. It doesn't have that deal 2 times damage clause that it used to have, so it's going to have that static burn equal to this item's damage clause. However, it does start at silver tier, so we can get it at silver tier. It is going to have a 10-second cooldown at silver tier, which is pretty steep, and I believe it had a 6-second cooldown before, so to get to the power of the gold flamethrower, we now have to get it to diamond tier, so it is ultimately nerfed, but we can get it earlier. Forklift now starting at bronze tier is pretty cool. I think that this was an item that I wanted to build around. I just didn't really have the opportunity to do this so a lot. So now getting it at bronze tier can be pretty cool. Hydraulic press. This is a new item starting at bronze tier. It's a type weapon and tool. It is a 16-second cooldown. It deals 0 damage, notably. And then it says at the end of each fight, permanently destroy the item to the left of this and gain that item's type. And then it also has a tag. This has plus damage equal to 50, 100, 250, or 500 times the number of types that it has. So it can do an obscene amount of damage. It also has a 16-second cooldown with no way of reducing that. So maybe we can give this the vehicle type and start charging it or something like that. Yeah, cool item. It can do a lot of damage, but man, is it slow. Moving forward here, we talked about the cores. Momosaur starting at silver tier. This is a really important change, especially with this latest patch. So I think that this is going to be a pretty important item in our dinosaur builds, where it has a 9-second cooldown, deals 200 damage, but it says when you destroy an item during combat, your dinosaurs permanently gain 20, 40, and 60. So it's going to pump all of our dinosaurs up, and then if your enemy has at least 6, 5, 4 items, destroy a small or medium item on their board. So I think that there's a very real destroy item synergy that's going to be coming to the Bazaar here. With this latest expansion from Dooley, and one that's probably going to feel really great to play, one that probably doesn't feel great to play against, but it will take some working to get these dinosaurs up and off the ground. Other notable changes here is that the railgun now starts at bronze tier, which is pretty cool. This is a really cornerstone build or cornerstone item of your tech builds, so you can get that at bronze tier, so you can get this early and start playing a tech build early, which feels pretty cool. You can put it next to like the weaponized core or something like that and start putting out a lot of damage. The red button here now has changed how it charges items. It charges adjacent large items for half their cooldown, so generally speaking that's going to be charging your large items for even more than it was charging before, and the red button has an 876 second cooldown, so pretty cool to see here. The plasma grenade also got what I would think and what I would say is a buff. It now has a 6-second cooldown compared to where it was before, and now it has ammo charges. So naturally, as we level it up, we're going to get more ammo on it. It's still going to burn both players, and it's going to not gain any more slow, but it is going to create a lot more slow triggers a lot more quickly, which is pretty cool. So if we put it next to an item that cares about slowing, that could work out really well. It also, just having those different pieces of ammo on it means that it can go off more than once, and thus it's going to be a lot more effective of an item, in my opinion. So we can always find ways to put more slowing on this through going to the junkyard and curio and trying to find one of our increase slow items when we sell it off. So the plasma grenade, I think, ultimately feels pretty good right now. Now, we've talked about Dooley here with the new items. I think that they're going to be pretty cool to play. Not a lot of numbers changes here as we saw, but ultimately I think with the new items we'll still have a lot more fun with Dooley and with those different builds. Let's move forward to Vanessa. So this is going to be a change again that we see across a lot of the Bazaar here, where a lot of the items got the relic type. So the ambergris got the relic type, the blowgun got it, the boulder, coral armor, so now those are all relics. The custom scope has been nerfed, so if you have only one weapon when you crit with it, charge a non-weapon item 1 second. So it used to also do that 2 second when you level it up, and it no longer does that. It's just going to be that static 1 second. Then as we level it up, it's going to gain more crit chance to the item if that you're the one weapon that you have. Next up here is also a nerf to the eels. Notably, the scope and the eels were played very often together, and thus we now have just seen this build nerfed overall. And so the electric eels has a cooldown of 876 seconds, and then it no longer is going to be charging more. This makes more sense to just look at how bazaar.gg. So electric eels, we can see in the latest change, it used to have 6 seconds cooldown, and now it has 876. So at diamond tier it has the same cooldown that it would have had at silver tier before, and then it had this clause of charge 1, 2, 3 based off its rarity, and now it's always going to charge 2. So overall, a little bit of a nerf. It's still viable if we can get this thing to diamond tier or even gold tier. It's going to be a very similar item, but ultimately it has been nerfed. As we saw towards the end of season 2, this custom scope electric eels build was very potent. And while we're here, why don't we talk about the figurehead? It also has gotten that cooldown reduction nerf. So again, a lot of these cooldown reduction items, they've had their numbers changed slightly. So instead of going 10, 20, 30, this now has 10%, 15%, 20% cooldown reduction for your aquatic items. So that's a change that we're going to see again with a lot of the items that were reducing cooldowns in the Bazaar. But let's jump back to the patch notes here. So Ice Pick notably has gotten kind of a rework on its numbers, so it does a little bit less damage, but it's going to gain more scaling, so that's pretty nice. We have renamed Vanessa's Amulet. It's gotten the relic type. Lockbox has got the relic type. Pop Snappers is now at 3 seconds instead of 4 seconds, which is pretty cool. So a very fast burn item comparable to the lighter, but the Pop Snappers does more than the lighter, so that's cool. The Powder Flask is now the Powder Horn, which I guess makes sense. That's probably what it is in real life, I think. Either way. Shipwreck now relic and a property, so good to know that this is a relic and something that you can get. The Silencer, again, has been nerfed a little bit in its cooldown reduction, and then the Slumbering Primordial is a relic, and the Star Shark is a relic. So, interesting stuff there. Overall, the changes to Vanessa, what we really saw is just like the Eels build has been nerfed a little bit, is what it is, but I think that with these new relic types, that could be something interesting when we get to like the expedition event and stuff like that. Moving forward to Pygmalien. So Pygmalien, only 2 numbers changes have really occurred, and I'll just point them out here quickly. So Keychain now has a reduced cooldown. There was an issue where it used all of your properties, which I didn't know about. I wish I knew about that. That would have been really cool. And then additionally here, Stained Glass Window now is going to give less cooldown reduction. Otherwise, Pygmalien just has a lot of items that got the relic type and renamed some items. So, you know, I was really hoping for more numbers changes, but that's not what we got. Although I did think that Pygmalien still had a lot of viable builds in the Bazaar before, so we'll see maybe if like mid-season they decide to change some numbers here. But regardless, this relic type has been added to a whole host of the Pygmalien items, and that might be relevant. Lumbor is also getting the aquatic type, so something to think about there. Mak items here. So this is one where I think the relic type really matters, because there were some items on Mak that really cared about having relics. So if we go to howbazaar.gg, can go to items, can sort here, go to Mak, and then we can also sort for the relic. I wish it would say relic reference, but now there's 35 relics on Mak. So this is going to be really important with the new expansion. There are a lot of items that want us to buy 10 or more relics, so now there's an opportunity for us to buy way more of them. There's also, again, items that care about having relics, which we can look at the Raven, which is, I believe, the Covetous Raven? Oh, that's not going to be here. The Covetous Raven, which says cooldown of 8 seconds, and deal 60, 80, 100 damage. And when you use another relic or enchanted item, charges 2 seconds. So a big buff to the Covetous Raven. Now I think that this is like truly a build around card that we can utilize with now all these new relic types. But again, let's look at what's gotten relics. So Amber is a relic, Earrings, Emerald, Dragon's Breath, Memento Mori, the Mirror, Pendulum, Ritual Dagger, Ruby, Runic Blade, Runic Daggers, anything with a runic type it looks like. Sapphire, Secret Formula, Soul Ring, Staff of the Moose, the Tzidian Dagger, and Peace Rot all are relics. So way more relics that we can play with on Mak, which is super exciting. Another big change here is that the Chunk of Lead, now the Chunk of Gold generation now only triggers out of combat, so it's a little bit easier to utilize the Chunk of Lead generation. Additionally here, we can look at like an Hourglass that now has the reduced cooldown numbers. So a slight nerf to the Hourglass. It was already not like the most strong. Same with the Palanquin here. That's got a little bit of a reduction in its cooldown reduction. The Sapphire has been changed, so now it goes off, I believe, a little bit sooner. But it freezes, it puts only 0.5 more seconds of freeze on your freeze items instead of 1 second that it did before. So it goes off sooner, but you gain less freeze on your board. I think it's kind of a little bit of a nerf. But yeah, we'll see how that all plays out. Ultimately, yeah, not a lot of numbers changes for Mak, just a lot of relic type gaining, and that is what it is. I think that with the new items, this will kind of help Mak buy a lot more relics and then thus complete a lot more quests on his items. So I'm pretty excited to see all of that. Last thing here is, well, I guess not the last thing. This is the other items, which just basically saying like a lot of items gain the relic type here. The Feather, now its cooldown reduction is a little bit lower. The Gatling Gun has been a little bit buffed. Ultimately, again, a lot of relics and things of that nature that have given the relic type. The Nargile has now been renamed to Zoot Flute. All right, sounds good. But let's look at some of these skills here. And I'll be honest, I've played, whatever, 400 hours of the Bazaar. I don't remember what all these skills names are, so I think let's look at that in howbazaar.gg. So I don't know about y'all, but I like having the actual picture to help me remember what it is I'm looking at. So there is a lot of skill changes here. Some of them more impactful than others. A lot of them are kind of like numbers tweaks, and then also allowing these skills to be acquired at a lower rarity. So instead of like all talk being at gold, now it's at silver. So just something to know there. I won't go through every single one of these, but I will talk about some that I think are pretty notable. The Adaptive Ordnance, when one of your items runs out of ammo, gain regen for the fight, I think is pretty cool. It's way better than where it was before in terms of its numbers. So you gain 10, 20, 30 regen before you have 10, 4, 6 regen for each ammo item that you have. So you get a bigger burst of regen, which is kind of cool. Other things here, we can also see that they've added new monsters. And then this is a skill for the Ancient Vengeance. So I believe we can get this skill, which says when your enemy uses a weapon, charge a relic 1 second, which is very powerful. Otherwise, yeah, a lot of little numbers changes here. Generally a lot of kind of like nerfs to, again, cooldown reduction and things of this nature. But we do see some impactful things like Burning Rage. When you burn, your weapons gain more damage compared to where it was before. So it's 5, 10, 15, 20 compared to 2, 4, 6, 8. We'll see this come up later with a similar skill, which is pretty good. Also, it changes the way these fights work. So for anything that is buffed in terms of skills on the monster fight, well, the monster has been buffed. So something that we have to think about. Additionally here, so that means that the Lich has been nerfed. So this Chilling Touch now slowed all enemy items through 3, 5, 7 seconds before. Now it's 1, 2, 3. So the Lich is just a little bit easier to fight, which is nice to see. Other big things here, I would say, are let's take a look at the extreme comfort. When you heal or gain regen, your shield items gain 3, 6, 9, 12 shield for the fight, so there's a reason to fight the retiree, which is pretty cool. Also, we can see that there are now some new monsters that have been added to the game with this skill here. So your free ride, it says your vehicles have their cooldowns reduced by 5, 10, 15%, which is pretty cool. This one that I thought was really interesting to see was Hunker Down. So Hunker Down has now been changed to where it says when the sandstorm starts, you take 25, 50, 75% less damage for the rest of the fight. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then it adds some diversity because we had already this fall below half health, trigger your shields equal to your max health type thing before. So I thought that was cool. Other things here, again, we have more monsters that have been added to the game here. I'll let you guys read through these more in depth here. Most of them, I'm going to be honest, I don't think are going to make too big of an impact to the Bazaar. I do think that the snowstorm makes fighting this Yeti monster, I think they are, more of a desirable thing just because the numbers on it are insane. So when you freeze, your weapons gain 2, 4, 6, 8, but now it says they gain 30, 60, 90, 120. So this fight is now much harder. And if we can get this skill, that would be really good for our freeze builds. So pretty interesting there. Other than that, not too much craziness with these different skills here. And maybe I already said last but not least, but lastest and not leastest, we have the monsters. So we can see that Hexa has been turned back on. They've changed, again, the silver tier. They changed rarities on the different skills here. So some of these monsters are easier to fight and things of that nature. Some are harder. There's also now 3 new monsters, I believe, that we can get. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3 new monsters that we can get on our different days. So we have the Ventriloquist, which has some vehicle and friendly doll, which is an interesting thing. New item, I believe. We can actually check that. Why not? Okay, never mind. I just tried checking that and it's not there now. Bazaar.gg. Interesting. So, new monster on day 2 that we can fight in our pool. And I want to see maybe if they come up here. So day 2, no, they're not there just yet, but I'm sure that'll be updated. And then there's a new day 9 monster with a Terror Forearm that has kind of a pretty interesting skill. Your weapons have no cooldown. Your weapons with no cooldown have lifesteal and 5 to 100 damage. So something like a Caltrops, that's pretty insane. And then Morgoloth, a new legendary monster that has this really cool Sword of Swords, which is a 7-second cooldown legendary item, deals 100 damage, and has +1 multicast for each other different hero you have an item from. So pretty cool. Yeah, so that's the changes, y'all. This is season 3 of the Bazaar. Overall, my initial impression is, I would have loved to see more numbers changes, as I said, but I still think that getting 2 new expansions is pretty fun. Also, I want to see how impactful this new event is in the Bazaar. And yeah, I'm pretty excited to play here in season 3 and see how the game feels. But with that, I appreciate you all watching here. I am, again, the Bazaar Whisperer. This is the Bazaar Over Explained, and I shall see you in the next one.